Our mission at the University Archives is to collect, preserve, and provide access to the historical record of this public university. But rare is the occasion that we, as archival professionals, are able to give space to the voices in the margins, 50 years after an event took place, to reunite, recollect, and record conversations for future generations. As I'm sure our moderator for today will tell you, the 15 alumni on stage are only a portion of the individuals who organized in the winter of '68 and 1969. There are some who are no longer alive, some who are not able to travel here today, and some who are here but are choosing to take their seats in the audience. Their names are listed in the program. Without further ado, I am deeply honored and privileged to introduce today's moderator, as well as our panelists. Please help me welcome Dr. Woods and our panelists this morning.
Well, thank you to each one of you here this morning. Before going further to introduce our panelists, I want to say just a couple of things. First of all, there are several of us in the audience here who are members of the staff or the faculty, the administration here at Eastern Michigan University. Can I just ask you to stand? And that includes the persons from the Communication Theater Arts Department, those who are taping our program. If all of you representing part of the Eastern Michigan employee family, if you would, or volunteer. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, thank you, and you may be seated. Now, what I want to do, though, it wasn't just to introduce those faces to us, but to offer on our behalf a mighty thank you to those of you who are here today as our panelists and our other alumni. We would not be the university we are, with as much as we yet have to do, but for what you have done. And every day that we step on this campus, we must continue to realize that it is the effort, the sweat, the toil, the anxiety, the frustration, exhilaration that you have given us that powers our journey. And I just want to say thank you in that regard. But again, history is written with a small w by human actors. It's what we do that makes history. It is also the people who tell the story that convey from one generation to the next what that history is. Sometimes that story is written, sometimes it is oral. It will shape the consciousness of a future generation. And so on this morning, we want to understand, as I know we may not have understood in the midst of it, that there was a watershed moment in our history, the late 1960s, the early 1970s. And these are the actors in that watershed moment. But they were not only the participants, they were the observers, and they are the people whose stories we now want to hear. Because this is the collective and collected memory that we have. And so we have a grand occasion that we're going to have today to talk about various things here. And I'm going to tell you how we're going to proceed. We'll first begin with having our panelists introduce themselves so that you can have a sense not only of the names, but of what that professional or civic or social or personal journey has been over now almost half a century. Then what we'll do is to go into a series of questions. Three main categories that we'll talk about. Number one, the context or the setting for 1969 and the February takeover of Pierce Hall and the issuance of demands in the year previous to that. We're going to try to ask our panelists, what is it that shaped your sense of priorities, your sense of purpose, your sense of mission as you came onto the campus of Eastern Michigan University? And then we're going to turn to the events of February 1969 in and of themselves. You know, we often think of this as simply an era of protest. But this is not a grand opportunity to come back and simply talk about 50 years of protest. We want to talk about the strategies, the thoughts, the planning, the allocation of responsibilities, etc. How you went about thinking about those things. Many of you probably launched your journeys as planners and organizers, as strategic thinkers during that pivotal time. And then we want to begin to look at what was the institutional response and the consequences of all of this. And lastly, we'll talk about a reflection 50 years later. What are some of the things that hindsight of nearly a half century used to do a little bit differently? Choices that you might make, plans that you might look at that might be a little bit different. Now, don't be compelled when we get to that to say, I would have done this. You might have said, I done it right. I did it right, excuse me. Thank you. But I want you to think about that, and then also about how that work of 50 years ago has informed the life journeys that you have led. So that's going to be our kind of format. And once we finish that, and this will take about maximally until about 12:15. And from that point on, then it's question and answer. And I want those of you here to raise the questions, offer the comments, offer the observations, so that we can have the fullness of what your contributions can be. And after we finish the questions or the introductions, then we'll sort of pose these questions and sort of ask selected individuals based upon their own desire to comment what it is that you might offer on these sets of questions. So again, with that in mind, I'm going to read the list of persons. I'm going to start with the back here to my immediate left with Mr. Marshall Jennings, and then we'll walk down and come this way, and then I'll come back to you and ask you.
Just some minor changes.
Oh, that's okay. And then I will. Thank you. And then we'll come back, and you will take it over there and say a few words about yourself. But this is Marshall Jennings. We have Kurt Hill. We have Miss. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Yes. And we have Eric and Lewis. Thank you very much. We have Mr. McReynolds, Russell.
That's Mr. Braggs.
Mr. Braggs, thank you. We'll just hold on for a minute here.
Nothing like live.
Thank you. Mr. Braggs, thank you very much. We have, and Judy, next to you. Jocelyn, thank you very much. I see it here. There we go. Judy Sturgis Hill and Mr. Steve Spencer. Ken Moon on our end there. Chuck Coleman, Floyd Walton, Bob Smith, Mr. Sanford, John Sanford, Jocelyn Boyd Harris. Thank you, Miss Pat Davidson. There you go. I got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn and Pat. Thank you very much. And Miss Mabel Jones. Why don't we start on our front row here?
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
You won't get that wrong, will you?
Thank you. No,
All right. My name is Dr. Mabel Jones. I worked, my work career includes employment with Wayne State University, Ford Motor Company, and the Automobile Club of Michigan. I am currently retired, but I continue to volunteer in the community by serving on boards that are focused on the development of children, such as Children's Hospital, a Michigan Foundation, Spouting for Children, United Negro College Fund, and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Dr. Patricia Davidson. I left Eastern and ended up graduating from the University of Michigan. Then I went to Atlanta University for a chemistry degree, a master's chemistry degree. Then I went to medical school at the University of Louisville at a time when women and African Americans were not welcome. So we paid a dear price for invading that environment. Then I ended up going into a more male-dominated area of cardiology. When we didn't have changing spaces, we had no place to dictate because the dictaphones were in the males, and the doctor's lounges were male, the bathrooms were male, everything was male. And so when you all open up your lockers and have locker spaces and showers and things like that, it's because we had to fight to get those basic kinds of things that that you all end up enjoying and don't realizing it. And then I was on faculty at Howard University Medical School and the University of Maryland Medical School, and then I've been in private practice in cardiology for about 30 years.
Thank you very much.
I'm John Sanford. I'm an attorney. I formerly was practicing in the Detroit area. I worked for a number of years with a private agency, United Cerebral Palsy of Detroit, being their outreach director. I worked and changed jobs and went to work for Wayne County Neighborhood Legal Services initially as a staff attorney, and eventually moved up to become the deputy director of the entire program. I stayed there for a number of years until I was called upon to come to Lansing, where I have been for about 32 years. I'm in Lansing. I'm the director of the Office of Recipient Rights for the state of Michigan. And for those who do not know what recipient rights are, the Office of Recipient Rights is responsible for providing the legal protection of anyone receiving mental health services in the state of Michigan. I have rights offices in each of the psychiatric hospitals, state hospitals. The mental health code requires an Office of Recipient Rights in each of the county community health programs like Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, and it requires a rights office in every private psychiatric hospital in the state or unit in the state. Even though my office does not necessarily directly supervise the people in the community, we have oversight. I have staff that go out and provide training as well as assessing and determining whether or not they're in legal compliance with state law.
Okay. I'm Bob Smith, and as I was listening to Pat, I said she still has the fire. Anyway, I'm Bob Smith, and I left Eastern in '71 and went on to Purdue University, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the substance of our discussion. From there, I went and worked at a black college in North Carolina Central, came back to Detroit and worked in public education as an administrator of media services for many years. And from there, I went to Wayne State University and worked on some major African American historical projects. And my last major position was Vice President of Education and Exhibitions for the Charles H. Wright Museum in Detroit. And I continue to work on small historical projects.
Like this.
Okay.
Floyd Walton. I graduated from Eastern in '73 with a major in history. I taught for 36 and a half years, about 27 and a half, 26 and a half in the Inkster Public School System. The last 9 years of teaching was with Westwood Schools, community schools at Robichaud High School. I was active volunteering at Messiah's Temple Church here in Ypsilanti on the south side for about 20 years, and then the last 20, almost 23 years with Christ Temple City of Refuge in Inkster, teaching Bible class, Sunday school as a board member, and also volunteering with the NAACP with their AXO program.
Thank you, Lord.
We got Chuck Coleman right here. Let's see here. After leaving Eastern, well, I worked 30 years for Detroit Edison. And right now I'm semi-retired. Let me see, I'll say that right now I work part-time, temporary, intermittently. I retired. Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. I was, they call it a rights-of-way facilitator. We facilitated the growth and development of DTE Energy by securing the legal authority for Detroit Edison, its electric utility subsidiary, to construct, maintain, and operate its electric facilities across the lands of others. And also, past charter president of the Optimist Club of Inkster. We developed programs, projects, activities designed to have a positive impact upon the youth of the community. I'm currently the chairman of the Inkster Commission on Aging, vice chairman of the Parks and Recreation Committee in the township of Van Buren. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be doing both of those since I don't live in Inkster no more, but nobody have stopped me, so I keep it going. And a bunch of other different community activities. I started a literacy program, Josie Oden Morris Literacy Project in Inkster also, and vice president of the Friends of the CNS Mission, which is really in Haiti, Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And I stay active and work maybe 3 hours a week or something like that. But that's about it.
My name is Ken Moon. I graduated from Western Michigan University, and I did my undergraduate work there. Then I went to the Mott Foundation to work on my master's and doctoral, which I took after finishing my master's program at Eastern Michigan University. I went on to finish up my PhD at the University of Michigan, and I held positions as Associate Dean of Students here at Eastern Michigan University during this protest period. Then I also was involved in at the University of Michigan, in some advising and counseling programs as head of the housing. And I left that and I went to Wayne State University, the director of the Student Center. Then I went off into private business, owned a couple of entertainment nightclubs in the city of Detroit for approximately about 10 years. Then I left that and moved to Marshall, Texas, where I presently reside, and I have a real estate interest in that state. And and now I continue to be involved in I work at as a member of the board at a little college called Wiley College. I don't know if you ever heard of it, the home of the great debaters. Yeah. And I'm continuing working with young people and trying to create educational opportunities for them, provide guidance and counseling in their various endeavors. And I'm kind of happy to be back on this panel because a lot of these young people I work with as an advisor and counselor during their careers at Eastern Michigan University, and I'm glad to see that that maybe I kind of helped them a little, gave them a little nudge on the way to being the resourceful and contributing to their society, and had to become outstanding citizens in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve? I am going to start making things up because I can't do anything with these folks. My job, the only reason I'm up here is because I was the administrative assistant to these people on the front row and a few folks on the back row. After I left here, I went off to Valparaiso Law School. After they got tired of me there, I came back to Detroit where I started working for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I stayed there in equal opportunity and community development for a lot of years, for 38 years. And after that, I have decided I'm not doing anything. I am still on the board of the largest youth athletics private neighborhood, shall we say, in Detroit. I think we're the only one that is affiliated with the league. And I, like I said, sit here because they were there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Judy?
Yeah, go ahead. I came here as a fresh person years ago, back when I met Kurt Cleveland Hill, these people who were making a lot of noise when I got here. And got involved, breakfast program, meeting with kids on the south side, very active. I got involved with forensics. I'm Eastern's first national champion in forensics. And that was a trip. I mean, it was a wonderful trip. But it was different, because when I was there, we went to a place and they weren't going to let us eat because I was with the team. That was an interesting experience. So we worked it out. Because I was a person of color, they were like, you can't come in here. And then the speaker said, if she doesn't eat, none of us eat. And everything changed, and we all got to eat. That was a wake up for me. It was like an experience that growing up in Detroit, I didn't have that kind of racism around me back then, but I survived it. And I have to be the first national champion, and I'm proud of it.
Well, thank you, Judy. Thank you. Johnson?
Yes, life has been a journey, and I'm continuing the journey. I'm glad my grandsons are here as evidence that I've had a fruitful past. I've got 4 of them, and a husband, and 2 children. So that's probably my contribution to the future. I'm focused on them now. But the reality is that Eastern set the course for me to probably be very much engaged in a lot of situations. I left Eastern, I went to Wayne State. I got a master's at Wayne in educational leadership, then got another master's at University of Phoenix. My travels have always been in education. That's why my parents invested in me coming here to Eastern. I spent 13 years working with Detroit Public Schools as a science teacher. I went into the alternative school. That was, something that they pulled me into. I guess my life's journey has always been working with those that are least appreciated, most at risk. So the alternative experience really led me into a lot of stuff. That was probably all based here in being at Eastern. My career was a 30-year career. I spent a lot of time working for Michigan State University as an extension agent in the 4-H program. So I coordinated gardening programs across the cities of Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park. And that was my opportunity to really make firsthand relationships with a lot of decision makers in those cities. And I've still benefited from those relationships today. My career, they would say, kind of came to retirement. I never use that word because I don't like it. As long as I live, I'll probably be engaged in some type of lifelong activity. But the reality is, thanks to our governor, Jennifer Granholm, I was one of the ones that early retired in 2002. When I retired from the Michigan Department of Corrections. I was a vocational consultant. So my job was to really help to facilitate the trades within the prison. And that was probably that wasn't my most challenging careers, but I would say it was most rewarding because, again, I was working with people who were disenfranchised. In retirement, I went to work for the City of Detroit Workforce Development, and I created a lot of programs. Corrections to Work was one of them, and the goal was to get folks reintegrated into the community. And so today I kind of do a lot of stuff, but I love my city of Detroit. I'm a precinct delegate. I've had businesses, Upsell Food, so I call myself a social entrepreneur. And I am a precinct delegate, so I do a lot in my community. I'm fairly well known as being a person who cares about people, and I use the word we a lot. And in old age, I'm seeing the benefit of working as a collective part of a team. So I kind of went full circle back to how we worked at Eastern as a team. I was a part of a very productive team. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My name is Harold Braggs. I was involved in the actual takeover back in the day. Most of my experience with the BSA here, and I think it's called the B something else at Michigan State. No, I was involved in Michigan State too, in their Black Student Union. I got married in 1974 to my lovely wife, Joanne, and most of my life has been spent working and taking care of my family. After I got married, I continued at school. I didn't finish Eastern until '78. But by that time I had a daughter, and I worked for Michigan Consolidated Gas for a number of years, and I went to A&R Pipeline Company. From A&R Pipeline Company, I retired. And since that time, I've had worked a couple of businesses with my wife. I'm the co-founder of a arts advocacy group. It's known as the Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club. We encourage artists and emerging artists, help them along with their career, and just push them along. I think that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I'll say my journey here was probably a little unique because I grew up here. And as far as the protest, I missed out on it in terms of being a student here, but I kind of felt I got some of the experience because we would come up here, you know, some of us high school kids from Ipsy. Wow, man, look at that, look at that, look at this. And then somebody in the crowd just standing there spectating would tell us, if you guys don't get out of here, I'm gonna kick your butt all the way back to your house, twice. One was one of our assistant principals, and I thought he was looking out for our interests. And also, one of our friends, his oldest brother was a Ipsy police officer, and he knew where all of us lived. So we got our butts out of there and, you know, went home or elsewhere. But I started in the fall of '70. And my high school advisor for the Ipsy Sim was a newspaper. You know, I wrote articles for the newspaper, and before I graduated, she said, well, you're going to Eastern, go up and see the editor. I can't remember his name now, but I went to see the editor and told him that because she was a former staff on the Echo. She told me to go there, talk to him about joining the staff. But he told me, well, you're a freshman, focus on your grade point average, and oh, by the way, the Black Student Association they're starting the paper. Maybe you might want to go check them out. To me, something kind of crossed up, you know, because I'm thinking like, well, the Echo has been around forever, and they probably have set roles for individuals to play. Going to something that's starting up, it may not be like that. You might have to spread yourself thin. But that was a learning experience. Somebody, well, he told me to go to Black Student Association. When I did go, I heard people saying stuff like, I think Jocelyn was one of them. I call her my big sister. I'm going to cover the story on the breakfast program on the South Side. And somebody else said, yeah, I'll do a story on the Big Brother program, you know? And I'm saying like, wow, all this stuff is going on. I'm from here. I gotta get in this, you know. I gotta try to help out my neighborhood. And I did. I worked the breakfast program. I was a big brother. I ended up having more little brothers than I intended because I was here, you know. Especially when that break came and most of the folks went back to Detroit or wherever, you know. And that was an experience, and some of them I still hear from. I run into some of them. Man, you saved me from going to jail. No, I didn't. You saved yourself. But I was honored and impressed to stand on the shoulders of all these people.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Roberta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'm Roberta Williams. I was Roberta Davidson when I was here. I came from Montreal, Canada, and started in the sociology, psychology department, graduated in that, ended up down south at the Atlanta University School of Social Work. I won't go into all the details, but I ended up, would you imagine, at Tuskegee Institute in agriculture, and I graduated with a master's from the Plant and Soil Science Department. I fell in love with an Antiguan Barbudan man, and I ended up in Antigua. And that's where my life really started in terms of my career. For over 8 years, I worked with the Ministry of Agriculture as the horticulturist and research officer. And then I was the founding member of a non-government organization called the Gilbert Agricultural and Rural Development Center, which falls under the auspices of the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas. And this institution started out as encouraging young people to go into agriculture. Many of the persons a lot of young people did not want to go into agriculture because of the whole slavery image. And so our purpose was to show them that it was a worthy occupation and it could be very lucrative. However, we began to expand into other areas, and the Guard Center, as we call it, developed as a vocational training institution, skills training for vulnerable youth. Youth who have dropped out of school, who have had literacy problems, brushes with the law. And most recently, we've moved into the prison, working with young inmates who are coming out within a certain time and establishing a reentry program. I have done that for 28 years of my life, and just last month I retired from that. And so my next phase of life, I'm waiting on God to give me that direction. And but I still will, of course, be very involved with young people and their vulnerabilities, which are many. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Kerry?
Okay. Graduated in 1972 from Eastern Michigan University, sociology and social work at that time. I was one of the ones that also was involved in the student takeover. In fact, I was arrested. So we'll get into that a little bit later on, I'm sure. And fortunate to follow Marshall here as an undergraduate admissions officer at Eastern. Spent about 4 years doing that, recruiting students. Also helped establish the Malcolm X Martin Luther King Scholarship here, and Ken Moon, one of the signatories of that particular scholarship, getting that started. Went over to University of Michigan, also recruited there as an undergraduate admissions officer. From there, went to GMI, I did some corporate recruiting, and spent some time also serving in the Army National Guard over several years while I was doing full-time work at the GMI. From there, I switched over to University of Michigan College of Engineering, where I retired this last year as senior academic advisor at the College of Engineering. Saw some brightest kids in the world there. And in the meantime, since I've retired, volunteer helping out with the grandkids, volunteer Meals on Wheels, and assist the youth ministry at St. Moses the Black in Detroit.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to start from the end and work back. Retired since 2010 as the Director of Financial Aid at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. Was involved in a lot of political activities when I was there. And then prior to that, spent about 3 or 4 years at the University of Toledo, also working in student affairs, financial aid. Prior to that, and was also involved in political activities in Ohio. Prior to that, was at Oregon State, where I spent about 12 years working there. I spent 2 tours of duty with the NAACP, got involved in corrections and community corrections and policing over there, and did a little teaching. And prior to that, was at Iowa State, and then Eastern Michigan, where I graduated with a degree in psychology and sociology, and worked in admissions and recruiting and financial aid for 2 years.
Well, thank you, thank you. Now we're going to get into some other things here. Let me say this. If we heard this, Eastern Michigan has a great composite recruitment tool that you just heard. You can see what has happened here by this journey at Eastern Michigan. Now we want to turn to this. Go back a bit. You're on campus, but what were some of the formative things before you got to campus that helped to shape the energy, the mission, the passion? What was happening in this greater country in particular, maybe in your community, that began to shape what you did and thought here? Now, we won't need to have everyone answer all of these questions, but if I could get a select few of you who would care to just raise your hand and just begin to speak about things that were shaping who you were by the time you got to Eastern Michigan.
Well, I belong to the Detroit NAACP youth group and the Detroit Urban League youth group, so my leadership skills were already being shaped because I had leadership positions in those organizations. And so I knew I had rights, and I knew I had goals and objectives, and that I should challenge anybody that challenged me. So I came ready for war. Yeah.
John. I think it's key from the standpoint that in 1968, I think many people know that there was a real big riot in the city of Detroit. And as a result of the riot, many activities were developing. And I found myself not really in an odd situation. It was at that time, just in 1968, that I met one of my best friends for life, and that's Marshall Jennings. Marshall and I met Marshall because Marshall, at the time, I forgot what Catholic school you were in, Marshall, but Marshall, along with several other people in the metro area, formed a group called SOAR, S-O-A-R. It stands for Students Organized Against Racism. And it was a cross group of black and white, and their whole effort was to try to change the whole concept of dealing with racism in the city of Detroit We had a number of activities. One of our peers even wrote a play that we took around the city that spoke about Black history and changes and racism. So it was like that kind of geared us up till when we got here. We were ready for bear. We wanted to keep the fight going, if you will. I don't know if Skips has anything to say about that.
That was right. I thought it was a dynamic group of people that we worked with. We worked with at the time out of
That is as a member of SOAR.
SOAR, as a member of SOAR, and we worked out with a priest, Father Cunningham, who drove a Harley Davidson around town, and was a proponent of racial justice as well. So it was a dynamic group, as John had said.
Thank you. Others, thank you. Floyd.
Growing up on Euclid and Wildermere in Detroit, the '67 riot, I got to see the entire thing from my front porch. I didn't have to get off the porch and miss nothing. When it was time, when I would go to the library, the public library, I had to walk past the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Harold and I, we went to junior high school, and college together. Our freshman year, we were there at Northwestern High, and Pearl Klieg, Reverend Joe Mogja's daughter, was a student there, so it was sort of natural. Also, my first choice for college was actually Kentucky State, but just before making that final decision, they sent me a letter stating that they had raised the requirements a little bit, and what that was about is some of our friends from Northwestern had gone down there and gotten involved in protest and gotten kicked out. So I think there was something in the water, the atmosphere, that when Harold got here, he got here one semester before me. That's why he got locked up and I was still laying in the bed at the dorm because I had just gotten here. But it was just something, it was in the air, not only for us, but for so many others. There were so many other students who may not have been as active as we were, but they were supportive. And that made us, able to do some of the things we were able to do.
Floyd, you referenced the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Mm-hmm. Folks local may know that. Yeah. Can you just speak
it was
60 seconds or less on that?
I'm trying to think of the original name of it. The Pilgrims came over here, and then the Pilgrim and Puritan Church sort of evolved a little bit and became from a group that burned witches at the stake to being one of the most liberal groups. And Reverend Clegg was pastor of a church right on Linwood and I think Columbia. So he got involved more in activism, and he changed the name of the church, and there was a big mural there. And he promoted a doctrine of black Christian nationalism that was really powerful at the time. I remember going to a church convention in Atlanta, and we did a street meeting there, and I'm walking across the park and ran into a guy from Detroit that had gone down there as part of their mission in in Atlanta. So that, having people who were involved in activism as fellow students, I think our history teacher was Tuskegee Airman. It was just part of what you did because it was, it was around you all the time.
Thank you. And notice here that theme of the formative influences here. Just a couple of others on this. Yes, Ms. Rosalind.
I'm Jocelyn. Yeah, I can change it. But anyhow, I was just thinking as you asked that question, for me, this activism really started as looking at my grandmother as an example of an activist. I was born in what is called Black Bottom. And I remember how she worked so hard to make sure that when the people left that area, that they left with money, the resources they need to go and resettle somewhere else. And it's the homeowners and the tenants. And that's still going on in my neighborhood today. Sad to say, but a reality. But then I think about, when you talk about activism, the opportunity to march as a 12-year-old girl with Martin Luther King. That was a great impact for me. And as Floyd was saying there, to sit on the east side of Detroit on my porch and watch everything burn, and to ask the question during the riots, why are we burning up our own community? That was my question. And then to go on in life and be involved in other episodes that said, you can't stand idly aside. You have to get engaged, totally engaged. And so that's kind of all that stirred up a lot of activism in me.
Thank you much. Chuck or Bob,
Chuck.
did you? Yeah, Chuck.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back a little further then. My grandfather met his wife in like 1925, and at that time he was in the presence of Elijah Poole, who became Elijah Muhammad. And he was associated with the Nation of Islam. He wasn't a member. This was on the east side, Davison and DeQuinda area. And then he moved to Inkster. The Nation had a presence in Inkster all that time. In fact, Malcolm X lived 2 blocks away from my grandfather, which he would have been associated with him. And then later on, back in like 66, 67, the city, I'm from Inkster, the city of Inkster closed down the community center, much like Park Ridge, which is over on the south side of Ypsilanti. And some brothers and sisters kicked the door in, turned on electricity, and started running programs out of there. Community programs out of there. And I'm looking at these cats, I'm like, wow, this is deep here. And then, of course, Mabel and myself were both in a program called Upward Bound, which is a pre-college program, so that had me ready to come to college. And then, of course, the 2S deferment helped me make that decision, because if you go to college, you will not be faced to go to the draft at the Vietnam War at that time. So that helped me too come here.
Yeah. Well, there are 2 incidents in my life that really helped radicalize me. I think the first incident was the death of my brother in Vietnam. He had gone to Vietnam. He joined the Navy at 17 years of age. He wanted to be a medical doctor because my stepmother aspired to be a doctor, and so he wanted to be a doctor as well. So he joined the Navy, was trained as a medical corpsman, but was assigned to a Marine battalion, and was shipped off to Vietnam. And within 2 weeks, he was dead. And that had a really powerful impact on me for a couple of reasons. It's because I would remember when my brother and I would, many times with my father and whole family, would go to Mississippi. And when we went to Mississippi, we would go to stores, we would go to shows, and we would have to sit in separate places. And so that was only like 3 or 4 years later when he was killed. And so the idea that my brother could go to Vietnam and be killed, but could not go into a theater, really had an impact on me. The other major thing that happened that really helped radicalize me was I had gone to a vocational school, Wilbur Wright, which at that time was probably one of the best vocational schools in the country, to be trained as a draftsman. And I got a job in a co-op with Bendix Corporation as a junior draftsman. And one day, the secretary in my division came to me and gave me this book and said, I think you may want to read this. She was a white secretary, and she says, the name of the book was Man, Child in the Promised Land by Claude Brown. And I started reading that book, and within 2 or 3 days, I had read the entire book. I was not a reader. I never thought about going to college at the time. And then after that, I read all of James Baldwin's books. I read Malcolm X. I read The Man Who Cried I Am by Ralph Ellison. I read The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Anything that was a black book, I read. So when I came to Eastern, I had already pretty much self-educated myself, and I was ready to become involved.
Thank you, Bob. Any others? We'll just.
I was going to say what brought most of us together was the takeover of a group on campus called Campus Service Corps, which was an organization that serviced the black community. And we provided breakfasts to them in the morning, tutorial services throughout the day, and then we did Big Brother and Big Sister activities with them as well. Prior to that, it had been a group of non-black students working in the black community. We thought that was not the image we wanted to project to the community and the involvement we as black students wanted to have with the community. So we got involved with the community in this program thanks to this group of people.
Well, Marshall, I want to, that's a very good transition to number 2, but why don't we, I think, Ms. Spraggs, did you want to offer anything right now?
You said me?
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience in activism is a little different from the rest of these people. The rest of you guys, I was you people. The rest of you guys is that I grew up very sheltered. When Malcolm X died, my shop teacher asked me, was I going to the funeral? And I told him, probably so. I didn't even know who Malcolm X was at the time. I had no idea. And my family had no involvement in any type of protests or any activities at all. I thought all black people lived in Detroit, Jackson, Michigan, and down south. And that was it. And no exposure at all. My first exposure to activism actually came when I came to Eastern. And when the takeover of Pierce Hall, my roommates were going, so I went with them. That's how I ended up there. That's how I got exposed to this. When I was in high school, my last year of high school, we had a Negro history class. And that was my first exposure to black history, to African American history. In fact, my history teacher was a graduate of Eastern. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Eastern. But most of these fine people I met here and was exposed to a lot of things that I had no idea even existed.
Thank you. That I think is a good setting to shift us now fully to the campus of Eastern Michigan University. We want to talk about what led to the forming of a BSA, or a Black Student Association, then what ultimately leads to a decision, and we might want to speak about student demands that are issued during that time, and then what leads to an ultimate decision that Pierce Hall has to be the site of collective action. But why don't we just sort of start with that and see who'd like to get us started with that journey. Take us from young men and women who are on the campus to get education and to advance something, to those who become involved as you ultimately did. Anybody wants to start? It's fine.
I'll start. Yeah.
By the way, I could be wrong about this, but Bob, I think I saw your picture up here. It's not here now, at least I don't think.
Well, I see.
I see you over here.
Yeah.
You're looking at everybody.
And that's.
Is there anybody else?
Kurt? Oh, you were right there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, I see the person that's.
Well, do keep looking.
Yeah. The person that's speaking actually up there is named Chris Booger, and when I came up to Eastern, actually I got to Eastern on a football scholarship of $250 that the varsity club in Detroit had given me to deserving athletes who didn't get major scholarships. And so when I came to Eastern, I didn't know anybody at Eastern. time that I arrived. And I stayed with a black family on the south side of Ypsilanti because I didn't have enough money to live in the dorm. And I would walk to school every day, practice football, go to football practice on the little field that was over there, not far from here, and then go to class, and then walk back over to the south side. I did that for my first year. But while the first year, I met a young lady by the name of Paula Hankins, who was very radicalized and very knowledgeable and conscious. I was just so enthralled with her. She was just knew so much about black history and about black people. And we had a history class together. And so I started hanging around with her, and through her I met Chris Booker, who was a socialist, who was a black socialist who really had read all of Marxism, and he was very heavily into that aspect of the movement. And on campus, you had these various groups. And so you had some groups that wore dashikis that was heavily into the black culturalism, and other groups who was into socialism, and then other various groups. So there were these various fractions of black students and activists on campus at the time. And so the second year I was here, there was some discussion. I was already hanging out with these people. And so there was also the official Black Student Association. But actually some of the younger students really, at the time, felt that there needed to be more activity, more activism on campus, and that the students at Eastern needed to do something. Because at that time, you had Columbia, you had activities in Madison, Wisconsin. Black students were taking over buildings. And so in '69, it was the high point of students actually demonstrating, particularly black students demonstrating. And so there was a number of things happening around the country. And so at the beginning of 1969, we felt that we needed to do something on campus. So my little small cadre of students began to plan something, that we would take some action, that the folks that I kind of hung out with. There was another group that caught wind of what we were thinking about doing. And so these various fractions, and even some students from the fraternities and sororities, we began to have some discussions about doing something. And ultimately, we began to have small meetings. And that meeting eventually evolved into a major meeting with all of the black students on campus. We met at Seal Hall, leading up to the takeover. And only a small number of students knew what was going to happen on that day. We did not tell all the black students what we were going to do. William Thigpen, who was one of those students who was arrested, was responsible for getting the chains and the locks.
Bob, let's hold right there.
Okay.
Right. No, because I want to see a couple, and so we'll remember to come right back to that.
Okay.
We got the chains, we got the locks. But others of you who perhaps can sort of speak to that era of building up to that period of time that Bob has really set out for us.
Yeah, well, I came to Eastern from Cass Tech, Nicole High School. Some people live in Detroit know about Cass. Tough curriculum, and really wanted to go to a black school. My mother said no, because I'd go to school and then come back and had to get another degree. However, so I came angry and disappointed. So when I came to Eastern really like it was a resort. I was going to take a vacation. But when I met the people on the campus and the racism and the prejudice and the white privilege, I can put all those words on it now. I was a young person, so I didn't know what it was, but I know I didn't like it, okay? And so it was my goal to be a part of something that was feeling like I felt. And not only feeling like I felt, but wanted to do something about it. So I was one of those persons who was always looking for something. I went to Campus Service Corps. I found that because it looked like a little church. And my mother, they liked me going to church. And so I ended up becoming a part of Campus Service Corps and saw all the benefits. We got our own cars. That was real big because we came on foot to college. And so here we are now. We got opportunity to get some cars. And then as I was with this group of people, we were not just concerned about ourselves, we were concerned about everybody. And so as a student at Eastern, now part of this group and Campus Service Corps with some vehicles, we started reaching out to the South Side and doing some things. So it was like, it was an opportunity now to get engaged and not just be angry.
And the Campus Service Corps was an already existing
white organization.
Entity.
It was existing. It was existing. Campus Service Corps, in its original form, was an all-white type of operation, totally white. And these white Eastern students were providing services to the black community. What happened was we had someone who was wise enough to sit in the midst of that and begin to bust the whole bubble. And that was Marshall. Marshall was the original person that brought the idea that we needed to make a change, and because of what the students were doing, we had students who did not believe that they were worth anything. They would sit in our rooms and tell us about their nappy hair and they're too black and all of that. And we just said, no, this is not going to work. So we made a concerted effort, a group of us, with Marshall's lead, to say, I'm going to just be honest, we told them that they were going to have to leave the South Side, and we were going to take over. But before I go any further, I want to give homage and respect to a very powerful figure that was very influential in helping us not only in that effort, but in our effort across the board in terms of making changes on campus. And he's no longer with us, and that's Chuck Minima. Chuck Minima, we would not have been able to do what we've done and make the changes that we made without the support of Chuck Minima. Chuck Minima, the way I would describe Chuck, and this is the way that I talk about certain people, Chuck was a brother, okay?
Although he was Caucasian.
Although he was Caucasian, he was a brother. He was a brother in the sense of being, in my eyes, a John Brown.
Lloyd?
To tag on to that, Chuck operated out of the Starkweather building here on campus. That building was donated by the Starkweather family for religious services, and he was director of religious affairs. Later, I found out that there's a yellow house on Huron River Drive right at Cornell where the Starkweather family lived, and that's where their farm was located. They were involved in the Underground Railroad. George McCoy worked for them. He would grow tobacco and make cigars, and he would load up his wagon to take the cigars to Detroit. In the bottom of his wagon was a hidden compartment. He would hide slaves there and take them to Detroit so they could escape